Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm Joel Hancock from Hancock Law Firm, callhancock.com. 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. This is my weekly Facebook Live show or video, whatever you want to call it, where I talk about issues and answer questions relevant to criminal defense. I am a criminal defense lawyer here in Carteret County, North Carolina, Beaufort, North Carolina. I put the message out on Instagram, Facebook, etc., that today I was going to be talking about or answering a question that I get very often. And that is, people call me, they're charged with something, usually it's a crime, a DWI, misdemeanor, felony, and they say one of the first things they want to know is, am I going to jail? And so I think that that sentencing, and particularly jail time in North Carolina or prison time, is a complicated enough issue that it warrants a video where I can at least go over some of the basics and help you understand what the issues are when trying to determine whether or not somebody, or when I try and answer that question, determine whether or not somebody is going to jail, whether they could go to jail, etc. So look, sentencing in North Carolina is so complicated and complex that there's no way in a short video. I'm going to try and keep this short because I've got to get out to the East Carteret football game tonight. But it's so long that there's no way I could get it done in a short video. So I'm going to try and go over simply just the basics of sentencing. And so I've kind of got my thoughts broken down into three areas: misdemeanor sentencing, felony sentencing, and sentencing for DWIs. And so let's get right into it. So for all three of these things, your sentence, or whether or not you go to jail, is going to be a function of your criminal record and how serious the charge is. Okay? So let me, and I'm going to scoot up to the computer. I don't mean to alarm anybody. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. So what you're looking at now is the misdemeanor punishment chart in North Carolina. And so what you can see is along the top in the gray area there, you see the space for prior record level or prior conviction level. Whereas along the side, you see that at the top there it says class. And then as you go down, you go from A1, 1, 2, and 3. All right. So that class is talking about the seriousness of the misdemeanor that you've been charged with. A1 is the most serious misdemeanor in North Carolina, and level 3 is the least serious misdemeanor in North Carolina. So basically, when you're trying to determine whether or not you can go to jail or whether or not you will go to jail, you have to look at a chart like that. You figure out, okay, where am I on my record level, and then how serious of a charge do I have? And then what you will see is, so let's take, for example, that you have a level 1, or that you are a level 1, and you have been charged with a class 3 misdemeanor. Well, you see, under class 3 level 1, it shows fine only. But then it shows 1 to 10 days. And then you see there at the top, it's got a letter C. And let me show you what C means. If you come down here, there's a key down there at the bottom on the right, and it says community punishment. So community punishment is going to be like probation. Whereas you see, there could be an I or an A. A is active punishment, which means active time. So you see that for a level 3 misdemeanor in North Carolina, the only time that an A comes up is when you are a prior conviction level 3, which means you have 5 or more convictions in North Carolina. And then at that time, the judge has discretion. You see that that block was CIA. The judge has discretion to either put you on probation mixed with jail time, or active time, which is that A block. All right. So let me just go back to that real quick. You're going to notice that for every block for every prior conviction level and for every class of crime, there's a letter or a group of letters, and that is largely going to determine whether or not you can or will go to jail. Now, there are some things like felonies that if your record is bad enough, it doesn't matter how insignificant or how petty the crime. If your record is bad enough, you are going to prison. And so, felonies are like that as well. Only rather than having, 4 classes like you have with misdemeanors, which is A1, 1, 2, and 3. For felonies, they're actually broken down into letters. So A is the most serious kind of felony. That's going to be like your, first degree murder. It's the A. And then follow up, or after that, B1, B2, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So A through I is the seriousness of the felony, but it also takes into consideration for sentencing your prior record level. It looks a little bit different than record level for misdemeanor sentencing, but it's similar. What you do, look at your prior record level, look at the seriousness of the crime, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, and then you come to the intersection, the box, that will have the potential sentence. So let's go back to misdemeanor. So, for example, A1 with record level 3, you could be sentenced to anything from 1 to 150 days. If you look there at A1 level 3, 1 to 150 days, but that could be community punishment or probation, or it could be active time. So, that's where you actually go to jail for that. Same kind of thing applies to felonies. It could be a C, an I, or an A. You could be looking at probation or jail time, depending on your record level and the seriousness of the crime that you've been charged with. DWI is a little bit different than misdemeanors and felonies. Now, they still do take into consideration your prior record, but only with respect to prior DWI convictions. Okay, so if you're charged with a felony or a misdemeanor, they look at every other felony or misdemeanor that you've ever been convicted of when trying to figure out what your sentence is going to be. But as a general rule, for DWI sentencing, the only prior record level that really matters is your prior DWI record or lack thereof. And for DWIs in North Carolina, they are rated in seriousness from A1 to 5. So there's a record A1 DWI, a level 1 DWI, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 is the least serious. A1 is the most serious. For a level 5 DWI, let's say just as an example, your first DWI and you're over 21, you don't have anybody else in the car, you could go to jail for 60 days, but very often you are allowed to do 24 hours of community service instead. Whereas for a A1 DWI, which is the most serious, you are looking at a mandatory jail sentence or as a general rule. And in addition to prior record level for DWIs, they look at things called aggravating and mitigating factors. So here's what that might be. If you have children under the age of 18 in the car at the time you commit the DWI, it's actually a super gross aggravating factor that can take you from a level 5 all the way up to a level 1. If you have a blood alcohol level of a 0.15 or higher, that is an aggravating factor that can potentially make your DWI sentence worse, take you maybe from a 5 to a 4, depending on the other factors, which could be good for you or bad for you. So let me break that down one more time so that we've got everything relatively straight. Misdemeanors and felonies, you look at all your prior convictions, prior record level, and the seriousness of the misdemeanor or felony that you've been charged with. You come to the grid, you look and see where the intersection is. It'll have a recommended or a range of the possible sentence, and then it'll say C or I or A or all of them, or any combination of them. So you could have community punishment, which is probation, intermediate punishment, which is like probation with conditions, which may include a jail sentence or what they call a split sentence, or active time, which is you have to do the whole sentence. Whereas with DWIs, yes, they look at your prior record, but only your prior DWI record. And then they look at other mitigating and aggravating factors to figure out where you fall on that scale of between A1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. At any rate, the takeaway from this ought to be that no matter how spotless your record is, there are still things serious enough that you could go to jail for. For example, you could have no record at all, but if you commit first-degree murder, you could still go to prison for that. And even if your record, if your record is bad enough, then there are certain things, if your record is bad enough, then you could go to jail for just about anything, no matter how serious, no matter how insignificant it is. But no matter how good or bad your record is, or how serious the charge, whether it's a misdemeanor, a felony, or a DWI, I hope one thing that you've all gathered from watching these videos, and I thank you for doing it, is that your best bet to get the best outcome possible is always to hire an experienced lawyer to help you out through the process. You will recall that with that misdemeanor sentencing chart that we showed, a lot of times the judge has discretion to either put you in jail or put you on probation. An experienced lawyer will know what it is that you need to do to prepare yourself to go to court, and in a situation where you could go to jail, get you probation instead. And so always, always, always hire a lawyer, maximize your chances to get the best possible outcome, rather than going in there and just winging it and saying, I might get probation and then wind up in jail. So at any rate, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you know a little bit more about sentencing in North Carolina now, and you understand why the question, am I going to jail for this? It's kind of hard to answer right at the very beginning, especially without knowing what your prior record level is. But you've done the right thing by that point by at least talking to a lawyer about it. So if any of you find yourself in that situation, it'd be my pleasure to talk to you about what I may be able to do for you here in Carteret County. Remember, call Hancock.com. Thanks, y'all.